What's up, y'all? This is Wheezy. And if you enjoy this content and find it rather exquisite, please feel free to leave a 5-star review on Spotify, Apple iTunes. And if you would like to support the show with some merch and represent, visit the link below. Much love, y'all.
And now's the time when things are shifting. There's going to be a new world order out there.
Well, he's dead, so...
My fellow Americans, I've said on several occasions that I wouldn't comment about the recent congressional hearings on the Iran-Contra matter.
What's up, y'all? Welcome to the What is Truth podcast. I'm your host, Wheezy. Hope everyone is having an exquisite weekend. I am joined by returning guest and friend, Mr. Robert Bitto. He is host of the Mexico Unexplained YouTube channel. How are you, sir?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing rather exquisite. Always a pleasure to have you. For those that have maybe missed the previous shows, if you don't mind giving us a little bit of background on how you started your channel and all that jazz.
Okay, well, I started the channel about 8 years ago, and I saw that there was a need for information about the unexplained, about mysteries, about obscure history, as they related to Mexico. And how this came about was, since 1999, I've owned an imports business. This year, I'll be celebrating 25 years in business. I'm very happy about that. And my business causes me to travel throughout Latin America looking for products, and mostly through Mexico. And I go to the back country, I go to the small villages and out of the way places, and that's my edge that I have. That's my niche. And so when I've traveled in these out of the way places, I've heard stories, I've been exposed to different things. And then about 10 or 12 years ago, I was on a plane and I was thinking, all of these stories that I've heard, all these things that I've seen, should I write a book? Should I do a YouTube channel? And then so I decided to do a YouTube channel and a podcast. I'm on Apple, iTunes. And it's been a whirlwind ever since for about 8 years now, a little over 8 years. I have 391 full shows. Shows are about 15 or 20 minutes. I drop them every Sunday. And then I have hundreds and hundreds of shorts. I'm on TikTok and I'm all over the place now. So yeah, people can find me anywhere.
Yeah, you've got a lot of great content, and it's, they're not too long either. So it's all synthesized and you can get it in a lot of information in bite-sized chunks. And I mean, you cover vast array of topics, from legends to UFOs to ancient indigenous history, all kinds of stuff. What would you say is your favorite genre?
Well, you know what? Ever since I was a little kid, and you've probably had many guests say this, when I was a little kid, I was fascinated by like ancient astronauts and all of that stuff, and ancient civilizations. And I used to actually, when on Saturday mornings, I would go with my mom to garage sales and pick up books for a quarter, like Chariots of the Gods and things like that. And some of them are behind me here or here. And I always used to read that sort of stuff when I was a kid. I was fascinated with ancient civilizations and UFOs and things like that. So my heart, I guess, is still with the ancients because it's so dynamic what we're uncovering by the week. You know, you think you know everything, and then some new study will come out. There's some new dig that happens in the Maya area. There's a new city that's discovered, and then that totally changes everything. So it's something that is an ongoing, you know, series of discoveries, and we're adding to the knowledge all the time. So to me, it's pretty exciting to study this stuff.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by, the life of ancient America, and that includes South and North Central America. There's a lot of stuff that we're continuously finding, like you said, and there's a lot of stuff that has a lot of questions. And, I'm a huge history nerd, and the more I dig into history, the more I tend to not believe in it. Because it's hard to tell how much of it is propaganda. Even things that we've been taught since little kids, when you revisit a lot of these things, you can find a lot of holes in it, and it only opens up even more questions. I don't know if I said it with you last time, but really, I personally feel the only written history that I feel is almost close to as accurate as can be is that of the Mongolian Empire. And the reason I say that is because they didn't have a written history. They didn't write anything, of their amazing or terrorizing, depending on how you look at them, conquest. A lot of it has been pieced together from other empires that suffered their wrath. And that's how it's been pieced together. So there's really no propaganda. Even when when the Mongolians wrote their own history, it was brief. There's one epic story of I think Jebediah or Subeday, I can't remember who it was, but he left the Mongolian Empire on a 2-year excursion. I can't remember if it was 20,000 soldiers with him to explore the West, basically Eastern Europe. And he just rolled through everyone. No one stood in their way, and they could have easily conquered Europe. And then I believe Genghis Khan passed away, and so he had to abandon that 2-year trip and go back, to pay the respects. And that's one thing that probably spared Europe from the Mongolian wrath. But when the Mongolians talk about that epic 2-year excursion, it's all like, yeah, he left for 2 years and then came back. they don't expand on it. So that's one example and that's the reason why I think that's as close as, history, in my opinion, is really the closest one to the truth. All these other stories that we get told, you really have to parse out, the propaganda. And as we always hear, the history is written by the winner. The U.S.-Mexican War, you hear it. I heard it growing up in an American school. It was far different from the Mexican version. And then you have to piece it together. Okay, what makes more sense? Was there a false flag involved? And it's so much of that. But, going back to the ancients, lately I've been kind of dabbling into the old world genre. I don't know if you're familiar with that. But, old world basically is suggesting that maybe even our civilization was far more advanced than we think, and a lot of that has been hidden. And it sounds far-fetched, but when you think about some of these structures that are built in little towns with only a couple thousand people, you're like, holy shit, this would have been an endeavor of tens of thousands of people. What the hell is this doing here? And then you think of, Tesla and free energy, and you mentioned that people think you're a crackpot or a loon for even going there. But then you have to wonder how the Mayans built their structures. Maybe they figured out, what free energy was and how to use it. Maybe that's what the ancient Egyptians did when building their pyramids. What are your thoughts on all that, on free energy or old world stuff?
Well, I've seen a lot of that old world stuff, and I'm very skeptical about it. Like, for example, I've seen things done on YouTube about cathedrals, for example, and how they could be generating energy. But my question is, for what? What would they be generating the energy for? Are they running small appliances or what? What were they using these towers that supposedly generated energy? What were they using that energy for? Where are the can openers and the grills, the kitchen tabletop grills or whatever? What were they using the energy for? Were they somehow, there are a lot of gaps in this sort of way of thinking. And I don't know if people can explain it to me, that'd be great. I'd love to learn more about it, but it just seems like there's a little more that needs to be put into this. But
I get you. That's where I get hung up myself. But at the same time, have you ever, God, I can't remember the guy's name. There was a guy in Florida that built Coral Castle. Do you know anything about that? And
well, supposedly he used energy to levitate 2-ton blocks and things like that. I've heard about that too. But
there's one stone that it's like a 10 or 15-ton stone that just swings like a door without really any force.
Yeah.
And the legend has it was, people had tried to ask him, how the hell did he do it? Because he wasn't using heavy equipment or anything like that. And he would just laugh. And he carried that secret down to his grave. And my mind, this is my own personal, like, he probably figured out some of that free energy stuff that maybe some of these ancients had figured out. And because when you look at even the Egyptian story, the story I was told growing up in school was that they rolled these 150-ton blocks on tree logs and rolled them that way. And now I think that is completely ludicrous and preposterous. In the nature of work that I do, the heaviest load I've carried was 35 tons. 35 tons you're rolling, and my vehicle's strong as hell. I had to pull someone out in a little pickup truck. They were stuck in a dirt lot, and they asked if I could pull them out. I'm like, yeah. I pulled them out. I didn't even feel them. That's how strong my truck is. And so when I'm carrying 35 tons, I'm struggling. Those red lights better watch out because I can't stop. So a lot of times when I hear these people saying, oh yeah, they moved 150-ton blocks, I'm like, you have no fucking clue what you're even talking about. I mean, I'm having a hard time with 35 tons with my powerful ass truck. And you're telling me these humans moved 150-ton blocks. You see what I'm saying? That's why I start to wonder and question.
Well, okay, you can say that maybe they were levitated by some sort of energy field, but then there are other people who look at it more practically, like maybe these aren't really stone blocks. Maybe they're made out of some sort of cement mixture. And that would make sense for certain structures like ones in South America, like in Sacsayhuaman. I've been there. I've been to Peru to a lot of different sites where there are these gigantic blocks that look like they intersect really smoothly, and you can't get a piece of paper in between. I remember the guide that we had a a sheet of paper and was trying to put them between these two big blocks. And the blocks were like 40 tons or something like that. But they could have been made by some sort of cement or some other sort of material like that and were formed that way. I don't know. I'm not a builder. It's not my expertise. I'm not a construction person. But those are some other theories that are being thrown out there. I wish there would be some expert in cement making or something come out and, look at this stuff from that sort of perspective. But that could be a dead end also. I don't know. But as I've said before, I think I said it on your show before. I say it on almost every show I'm on. It's okay not to have the answers. It's okay to say we don't know. It's a mystery, and it's okay to wonder. We don't have to have answers all the time. And we don't have to, because we don't have an answer, it doesn't mean that we have to fill in the holes with whatever the next theory is. There's always a joke online. Oh, it's aliens. When you can't explain something, that's like the caulking agent that you put in the hole or something. It's the filler that you put in there. Yeah, it's aliens. Well, you know what? If we don't know, we don't know. That's it. Move on to the next, thing that you want to examine. You hit a dead end. That's it. Go on to something else.
Yeah, my buddy with from the podcast, Those Conspiracy Guys, they did a big show on the pyramids. And that's what they're kind of proposing, that they were built on site. You can see pictures in some of the Egyptian pyramids where you still have some of the wooden framing, kind of proving that, right? And that seems to make a lot more sense than the bullshit story that they were dragged out, that heavy without any heavy equipment. But I mean, there's so much, and I know. Before it skips my mind, I wanted to dig into the whole solar eclipse. That's something that's happening on Monday. Some people are saying the world's going to end. All kinds of crazy shit.
Gosh, I'm so old. The world was supposed to end so many times by now. I remember when I was a little kid, 1982, in the 70s. I'm close to 60, I'll tell you. But in the late 70s, everybody was saying in 1982, the world is going to end because the planets are going to line up. And it's going to cause this gravitational distortion, and it's going to knock the planets out of their orbits. And, then we'll go spiraling off into space. As a little kid, that scared me probably about as much as the coming ice age. The coming ice age that we were supposed to be knee deep in by, I don't know, the year 2000. What happened with that? So, I'm sorry. Any doomsday prophecies, they're hard for me to swallow. Even the ones that have been around for a long time. Like someone I knew on Facebook did a tour of Israel, the Middle East, and went to the Valley of Armageddon. And she was saying, this is where the last battle is going to be fought. And I was like, oh God, I'm sorry. We're all going to die when we're 100 or whatever. We got a long ways to go. And I think the whole doomsday end of the world thing is rooted in our own subconsciouses, our own subconscious mind tells us we're going to die. We all know that. It's an inevitability. So that gets projected outward. This person, this mythical character is going to come back and the world is going to be destroyed or whatever. And that's going to happen in our lifetime. We're going to have this big cataclysm and all that. I think that's deep seated inside each human, that our time's going to be up sometime, but I don't know. It's kind of interesting. And I've seen a lot of stuff, like these earthquakes that have been happening, which you're from California, right? You lived here for a while. So like a 2.4 earthquake or whatever, in the East Coast, that's nothing.
I've
And
been in the
so
6.5s and 7.2s, man.
yeah,
those are
I've been
something.
in some earthquakes that were over 7 here and in Mexico. Okay,
Yeah.
not just in California. But so, the earthquake in New York and all of this, people are saying that this is leading up to what's going to happen on Monday. Ooh, the eclipse. And so, it's more of this fear-mongering stuff. The eclipse is interesting. I mean, it's a phenomenon that we all can observe and share in. We live our individual lives, and this is an event that we all share in. So, but yeah, it's kind of interesting to see online what people are saying about what's going to happen on Monday. But it's going to be a big yawner. We're all going to just go on with our lives, and that's it.
Yeah.
Sorry to disappoint if anybody has such a miserable life they want it all to end or whatever, but you're going to have to write that check to your landlord or whatever the very next morning. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, it happens all the time. I mean, the year 2000 was supposed to be the end, and Y2K. It's always the goalpost is constantly moving when it comes to that regard. But
Right.
I mean, solar eclipses are a rather interesting phenomenon. So I could see the ancient world being mystified by these events in many ways, and you know. The one that's going to happen on Monday, I believe, on the 8th, it's going to make a trek through Mexico, and then it's not a straight path. It's going to shoot up through Texas and then make its way up north near the New York area. And if you're east of that line, you won't see the 100% eclipse, but you'll see a lot of it, 80% of it. If you're in the West Coast, like in the Washington area, you may only see 10, 15% of that. So it just depends on how far away you are from that line of path. But it's an interesting phenomenon. It's where the moon is essentially going to block out the entire sun, and it's going to be the perfect shape of the sun in the sky. And so all you'll see on is that magnificent aura. And so you have to try to place yourself in the mindset of the ancients as to what it must have been like to witness something like that. How many people lost their goddamn eyes for looking up at the sun when this happened? You know what I'm saying? Because you're gonna hear a lot of knuckleheads losing their vision.
Is that a myth? Is that
What do you
really a
mean?
myth? Or that
To look
if you
at the
look
sun?
at an eclipse, you know what? Okay, I have to tell you this. I'll confess something to you. February 1979, there was a total eclipse, right? And I don't know, the recess bell rang. They kept on telling us, because I was in elementary school, kept on telling us, don't look up at the sun. I don't know why they let us go out for recess. I guess nowadays they wouldn't. They'd probably cancel school or something for the whole day. But so I remember we were out on the playground and all these teachers were out there saying, don't look at the sun, don't look at the sun. Well, what did I do? What was the first thing I did? The first thing I did was look up. Sorry to say, I disobeyed the teachers or whatever, but I'm almost 60 and my eyes are 20/20. Nothing happened to me. So I could be an anomaly or whatever. I mean, if you stare at the sun for a long period of time when there's no eclipse, that can have some effect on your eyes. I don't know if this is a myth or not, but it didn't affect me. And that happened 45 years ago almost. What? That long ago? Wow. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know if that's a myth or not.
I don't
We're
know either,
questioning
but I don't want
everything
to.
on
I
this
don't want to try
show.
it out.
Right? On this show, we're questioning everything, right? Well, as a little
Yeah.
kid, I did it. I tried it out.
Yeah.
Crazy kid that I was, right? I also ran into a dust devil. And for those in the Southwest, there are mini tornadoes. that, kick up dust, and they're called dust devils. The Hispanic community used to call them diablitos, and they're like tornadoes, and they would just happen spontaneously, And anyone who's lived in New Mexico, Arizona, or whatever, Texas, they know what a dust devil is. And there was a huge one. And I thought, well, it's probably like a hurricane or a tornado. There's probably an eye to the dust devil. So I went running into the dust devil. But the thing is, the dust devils are not stable. So I just ran into it and I just got thrashed by everything. But yeah, so I used to do things like that when I was a kid. I would, I guess, tempt nature or something, I guess. And so I looked at the eclipse. I ran into a dust devil. How are you going to learn, right?
Yeah. That being said, I'm not gonna try that experiment, Mr. Bitto. I'll just take the pictures, later on in the day. I'm sure Twitter or X. I hate calling it X. It'll be shit tons of pictures online as soon as it happens. So
right. I'll have to stop you right here and say, I am not advocating that anybody do this. Just like I don't advocate that anybody would run into a dust devil. Okay. Don't do that either. Okay.
Yeah.
So
don't try this
don't
at home.
sue me. Let's protect ourselves here. Okay. Don't do it. I'm not advocating it.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, going back to what the ancients, I mean, the Mayans were geniuses in many ways when it came to mathematics.
Right.
Their astronomical genius doesn't really get appreciated, I think, by a lot of people. But for you to build pyramids in which certain shadows would appear during certain times of the year, maybe every other year or whatever, and cast the shadow of Kukulkan on the ground, that is phenomenal stuff. I mean, when you think about the mathematics, the engineering behind that, I mean, how do you even get started with that? And so I've been looking more into it. I had a gentleman. I don't believe in flat Earth, but it seems like a sizable of the followers do believe in flat Earth. So I try not to disparage anyone. I mean, everyone is free to believe what they wish and what they feel is true. But I started looking. I go, well, did the Mayans believe in flat Earth? And then I ran into an article you had wrote on them, and it appears that they were flat earthers as well. Can you expand on that?
Well, I guess they were relying on what they could see. So if you rely on your five senses, the Earth is flat, right? So, but what you were saying about they were mathematical geniuses, and to tie this into the whole eclipse thing, they had tables that they created, almanacs, where they could predict eclipses. In fact, the Dresden Codex, which is considered, some scholars call it the oldest book in the Americas that has survived. Some others call the Grolier Codex, which is also Maya, which has been renamed to the Codex of the Maya. The Mexican government renamed that book. But one of the oldest books in the Americas, the Dresden Codex, had an almanac of eclipses. And in that, the book is pretty deteriorated. It's not in good shape. But researchers were looking at that table and saw that the Maya predicted an eclipse. This book was written in the 10th or 11th centuries, and they believed that it was a copy of an older book. So the height of the Maya civilization ended about, the height of the civilization was about 700 AD or so. Then it was on the decline, and then it collapsed by 950 AD. So this book dates back to about 1000 AD, they're thinking, but it's a copy of a much older book. So during the height of the Maya civilization, they were predicting these eclipses. And from what we can see in this Dresden Codex, the Maya predicted that an eclipse would happen in the Maya area on July 11th, 1991. Okay, that's our time. July 11th, 1991. And it happened. So they were predicting an eclipse possibly 1,000 years into the future. That's how accurate they were.
Well, and just to add to how accurate they were, some of the stuff they predicted were off by like 4 hours, literally 4 hours. I mean, these guys were insane. I mean, it's really mind-boggling when you really think about their accomplishments. And one thing that gets overlooked a lot of times by, how to put it, people that don't look into the Mayan civilization very much, if at all, is that they built this, kingdom or empire, whatever you want to call it, 200,000 people strong in the middle of the fucking jungle. I mean, think about the logistics to build something so massive and so huge in that era. I mean, it would be hard to do today, and some people say that's probably what contributed to their decline. Maybe they ran out of resources to sustain such a large population. That's one theory that definitely gets thrown about. But I mean, their achievements were, I don't know, and we're still learning more, like you mentioned at the very beginning. And the Mayans didn't disappear. The descendants of Mayans are still around. There's still a Mayan dialect that is spoken in Mexico and Guatemala and other southern regions. But I'm truly fascinated by Mayan culture. I ended up getting a tattoo of Kukulkan, spitting out humanity.
Really?
Yeah, right there.
Wow.
I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah, wow, cool. Awesome.
That's Kukulkan. You've probably seen that glyph, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's Kukulkan, the serpent god. The Aztecs knew him as Quetzalcoatl, but basically spitting out humanity. And I thought it was so cool. I mean, their glyphs, their statue. I'm fascinated. I want to finish that sleeve with all Mesoamerican art.
You have a lot of material to work with, that's for sure, because there's a lot of it that survives to this day.
Yeah, for sure. And so you did a recent show on the show Doom, I believe. The name of the podcast is Doom. And you guys were covering a little bit of the omics. I think we touched on a little bit of the omics last time around, but the omics are, it's a culture that fascinates me, even though we know very, very little about them, because I always like to break down things as close as I can anyways to the origins. And so, a lot of people look at the Olmecs and they were pretty much the father of all Mesoamerican civilizations. A lot of their deities, a lot of their ideas were borrowed by other civilizations, and that includes the Aztecs and the Mayans, as well as many other tribes in the area. And so my mind goes to wonder, okay, they didn't just spring up out of nowhere. There had to be a process in which they got to where they eventually got to, and then and the problem is we just don't know too much. There's theories from the Afrocentric folks saying that they're Africans. There's a lot of stuff out there. You've proposed a great theory that maybe the giant Olmec heads that people say have African features were probably ball players that were revered back then, just like they are today. People revere LeBron James or a Michael Jordan, and your theory makes a lot of damn sense. They could have been ball
Well,
players and MLB statues.
yeah, they're wearing ball court gear, the helmets and stuff. So why would an academic would be prone to say that, well, it's a big monumental sculpture, so then it must have been an important person. So therefore, it must have been a king or a god. Well, sports figures are like kings and gods to people. I mean, sometimes even more so. Like you mentioned, those sports players' names that you mentioned, they're more famous than Joe Biden or Pope Francis, and they're more beloved. So it would make sense to me that they would make monuments to their sports figures. And the ball game in Mesoamerica was like football is to the United States or soccer is to the rest of the world, in that it was important, and that, you know, the whole bread and circuses thing that we've heard ever since Roman times, where you distract the population. Well, these complex civilizations in Mexico, they were highly stratified, just like our civilization is today. You have the haves and the have-nots. How do you entertain the have-nots? How do you keep them busy so they don't revolt? Well, you put on a show. You put on these games. And these stars of the games, you're living your life through them. You know, if this person, you know, scores a touchdown on your team, you jump out of your chair and start cheering. The same thing happened there, I'm sure. Human nature isn't all that different. But if you're an academic stuck in this narrow-minded way of looking at things, you're not going to look at that possibility. See, now what you have on your screen right now, that's a huge head that took a lot of resources to make, because they had to get that boulder down off of the Tuxtla Mountains. They had to get that boulder off the mountain to a place where they can carve it. Some of these heads traveled across swamps and rivers, and it was a big deal. So if you were a ruler and you wanted to placate your people and keep them happy, you're not going to carve a head of you yourself, King such and such. You're going to carve the head of the sports star that everybody loves. You're going to pay for it yourself, and then people are going to love you because you made a head of, you know, whoever this person was. So I don't know. That's my theory, but I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm not a
I like it.
professor. People just call me that online. So
No, I love that theory a lot, because and you talked about how you brought it up to a, you know, a researcher or someone, you know, some kind of academic, and they kind of laughed it off. But
yeah,
it makes a lot of damn sense. And that's the thing with a lot of these quote unquote academics. They learn one damn thing, and it's hard to talk to them about any damn thing else. It's like they're
it's
living in their own echo
indoctrination.
chamber.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's indoctrination. And if you don't go along this certain way of thinking, then, you know, just like any scientific endeavor, you lose your funding, you lose your reputation. Who's going to pay you? Who's going to, you know, perpetuate your income? Then what? Then you end up homeless or end up working in an Amazon warehouse or something like that. So if you're in the academic world, you're going to toe the line. You might suggest things here and there, but you don't want to be looked at as a kook. So, you know, people will call me professor in my comment sections or whatever, but I'm kind of glad I'm not a professor because I can say these things and look at these things differently and not have any fear of repercussions. And everybody should have a curious mind like that. So it's too bad that, you know, the mainstream isn't like that. But
yeah, it is what it is. It gets old after a while, just like a lot of other stuff. If you criticize something and you get called a transphobe, or if you criticize what's going on in the Middle East, you get called a bigot. It's really of the same playbook, and I
Mhm.
think little by little, a lot of that's losing its power. Uh, a lot of people are seeing behind the veil of bullshit. So, no, but I think your theory does make a lot of damn sense. I mean, these sculptures, and if you guys are just listening audio only, definitely check out the video channels. I am on YouTube for this show, but the vast majority of my content is Rockfin or Odyssey. So if you don't want to miss any of the stuff, definitely check me out on those platforms. But the image that I have on right now is another giant Olmec head. How many heads have they found? Is it 12 or 16?
Yeah, it's probably it's over a dozen,
Yeah.
and they're mostly in the Gulf Coast of Mexico, that area. There was one that was found in Guatemala, and no one knows how it got there, but there was trade from the Gulf Coast to the highlands of Guatemala, and also the coast, the area called Soconusco or Soconusco, where they used to grow a lot of cacao. So there was contact between those areas. But yeah, they're still finding things too. So, we don't know how many heads there were.
Yeah. And what are they, what do these quote unquote experts date them at?
Well, they go back to the Olmec civilization, which is, 2000 BC to, right the few centuries before Christ. So, yeah, they go back, 3,000 years or so. And
Yeah.
that's only
And
because of what they've been discovered in context. Because you can't really date stone. You can't date carved stone. So,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. There's no carbon dating there. Yeah, it's I mean they're beautiful, beautiful sculptures. I mean their craftsmanship to do such things. Um, is it known what they were sculpted out of? Was it
It's basalt, it's volcanic. Yeah. The source of these heads are from a single mountain area, the Tuxtlas, Tuxtla, Tuxtla or Tuzla, however you pronounce it. But yeah, they were taken off the mountain and carved. So yeah, it took a
yeah,
lot it was a big endeavor.
that's probably going to be one of the pieces that I get on my arm as well. I love those Olmec heads. I mean, they're exquisite pieces. I
And to
want to get
see
a
them in
miniature.
real life, and sorry, to see them in real life, they're just gigantic. There's one that's like 9 feet tall almost. I think that was one of the ones that you showed in
Yeah.
your
Well, you
picture.
saw that man standing right in front of it. He looked
Yeah,
like a midget.
yeah,
A full-sized human being, and that guy probably is 5'10" to 6 feet, and he looked minuscule compared to these heads.
right.
Yeah, I mean, amazing works of art. Yeah, and the term Olmec was a name, and correct me if I'm wrong, that was given to them by the Aztecs later on, and
Right,
that basically calls them the rubber people, because
right,
even to the Aztecs, they were ancient to them, and
right.
the Aztecs were mesmerized by the footprint that was left by them thousands of years before they came about, which is another testament to the mighty Olmec civilization. Is it known what they refer to themselves as?
No. And there's really no way to know that because they had a rudimentary writing system, but it wasn't. It was like a very, very, very crude emoji system. And so writing wasn't fully developed in the Olmec time. So we don't know their name and we have no way of knowing what they called themselves. It was something the Aztecs called the people living in that area when the Aztecs conquered the Gulf Coast of Mexico, the Olmeca, the rubber people, like you said, because that's where the rubber, the latex came from for the balls, for the ball courts. So that was an important resource. that the Aztecs went in that area and took over that area to control that commodity.
Yeah, very, very intriguing stuff. I do. So my my parents are from Zacatecas, Mexico. My mom, tragically died suddenly in January of this year. Miss her every damn day. But both of my parents are from Zacatecas, and I think I mentioned this last time around, but my mom's dad. So my grandpa on my mom's side, he was a full-blooded Zacateco Indian, and he married a white lady of French descent, full Mexican, but she was of French heritage. She was a blonde-haired, blue-eyed woman, and my grandpa was a full-blooded Zacateco, and that's where my light skin comes from my grandma's side for sure. But
And do you move around a lot? Sorry to ask that question. Do you feel the need to move around a lot?
I guess so. I've lived in California. I'm ready to move again. Selling my house out here in Florida. I don't know if I'm going to stay in Florida or if I'm going to move out of state. That's still up in the air. So maybe that answers that question.
The whole reason why I asked that is because the Zacatecos and all those northern tribes, they're considered Chichimeca, right? And so a lot of the central to northern tribes, they were nomads. And what I've heard from a lot of descendants who have the blood in them, they can't stay in one place. And, I've heard that so many times from people. I've heard that so many times from people that I think there's some genetic component to that, maybe.
That makes sense. I am a goddamn nomad. Hell yeah.
So there's the Zacateco in you.
Yeah, I mean, my parents were from a little town called Jalpa, Zacatecas. Jalpa is another indigenous name, and it's a small town. I grew up in LA, a big city, metro area, but I think why my views today are what they are is because of that country feel that I got whenever we go back to Mexico, to Jalpa, to that little town where it's a farming community, small little town, very conservative and stuff like that. And I got to live that as a child. And growing up in LA is the big city, club and all that bullshit. And then I got the conservative side. So that's what I think helped shape my worldview as I got older, because I got to see the hardcore lefty shit. I got to see the very conservative right shit. And, now that I'm older, I just try to have a more balanced view on, I might like views from here. I may like views from there, and I don't ascribe to any team. And I think that's the role that my growing up played in that. But Jalpa's a little town where it's kind of a major little or important little town because there's 3 highways that diverge from there that'll take you up north, that'll take you east and west. And I remember as a kid, and I don't know if we talked about this last time, but as a kid, the Tastuanes are a local indigenous community from that town. And every time we went down there, like, if we didn't behave, my moms would say, if you guys don't behave, I'm going to have the Tastuanes take you guys, and they eat kids. And we would be chilling at my grandma's house, and you would hear the drum, boom, 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 from like a distance away. And that beat would get closer and closer. And they would visit pretty much all the houses in the town, getting for donations, But as a kid, and you're told that if you don't behave, you're going to get kidnapped. You were on your best behavior. And I never understood it until I got much older. But, these Tastuanes, they would wear these blonde wigs. And they have these scary faces. And the more I did research, I don't know if you've done any research on the Tastuanes, but the more I did research, what they're trying to symbolize white Europeans coming into town and causing havoc onto their community. And so by looking like these scary guys with these blonde wigs, that's what they're representing. And it's really, really neat. The more research that you can do. I want to play. I found a little Tastuanes clip, and it's evolved. I guess nowadays they put banda when they're dancing, but back when I was growing up in the 80s, it was just a simple drum, like an indigenous drum, tum, 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 just coming down your street, ready to kidnap kids.
That's scary, man.
Yeah, it's scary shit. But then you realize it had nothing to do with kidnapping. It was just, an indigenous performance. Can you see that on the screen?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm using Brave browser. Here's a life hack. If you want ads on your YouTube channel, get Brave browser on your computer or on your phone. You will never get a YouTube ad ever again. So there's your life hack. Compliments of Gory Walker. Shout out to Gory Walker for sharing that with me. It's been a lifesaver. You don't have to get YouTube Premium anymore. Pay $10 or $12, whatever a month, because you can listen to it in sleep mode as well.
Huh?
So unless you're watching Dr. Bitto's or Professor Bitto's YouTube channel, definitely watch his commercial so he gets monetized for that. But anyone else, skip that shit. All right, here's the Tastuanes. So see those wigs?
Oh, wow.
See there, that represents the European Spaniards coming into town. See the beards right there?
Wow.
See, now they use banda to jam out.
Wow.
So that's a little flavor anyways.
Cool.
And that they're from a different town in Zacatecas. The Tastuanes from our little town, they would just come down with a little collection box beating a drum, and then there'd be a few of them that would get ahead of the pack, and just they already knew that the myth was that we would that they would kidnap kids, so they'd go up and scream and be terrified as shit. But great memories growing up, and like I said, the more I found out as I got older, I'm like, oh, it has nothing to, there's no nefariousness going on. It's just them collecting money for their communities, every year, and that's how they would do it, and I did want to ask you about, from the blood in me, the Zacateco tribe, there's not much information out there. There's the Quemada ruins not too far away. And then you have La Batalla del Mixtón, which means the battle of the Mixtón. Do you have any information on that?
Yeah, that was a major battle. I think it was in the 1540s. There were the Mixtón Wars or Mixtón Wars. And that was one of the first big beatbacks of the Spanish when they tried to go north. And there were several leaders that came out of that. I did a show on that, I guess like 6 or 7 years ago. But yeah, it's a very interesting history. Some of that history has been revised. I saw on Wikipedia one time that they talked about that war, and they talked about the Chichimeca Confederation. The Chichimeca were not politically organized. There was no confederation. You had spontaneous leaders popping up here and there, like I said, to beat back the Spanish. And then they just got a whole bunch of people together. And, there was no confederation or anything political like that. But yeah, that war lasted for a few years. But the resistance lasted a lot longer than that, probably about 100 years after that. They were still pockets of people fighting the Spanish up in the northern part of Mexico. But it's an interesting history. It's not very well known in the United States, but it's not our country, but it's interesting.
Yeah, it's a very very fascinating history. I guess if you can't relate to it, probably just a bunch of noise, and you can't relate to it. and maybe that's why it hits me hard, because I can relate to it. Uh, my my European side of my heritage was part of the 1540s Spaniards that arrived in Mexico. So way the fuck back then. And then obviously my indigenous side had been there for thousands of years. So when that's the thing about when you look at Mexico a lot. There's the indigenous culture is very strong. There's still a lot of racism too, which is funny because if you're proud in your indigenous culture, you're considered less, and not everywhere, but in some places that still exists, unfortunately. And I make the joke when I used to go to Mexico. Some of the Mexicans would kind of laugh at my Spanish. They'd say, "Oh, look at that American speaking English, blah blah blah." And now that I'm older, like I'm hoping someone makes fun of me, because I'm like, "Bitch, you're speaking a European language yourself. You're speaking Spanish. Let me hear you speak Nahuatl." You know what I'm saying? And so it goes both ways. And your views change as you get older. They evolve. And that's just part of growing up. But I've been fascinated. I spoke with my dad. I let him know I was going to speak with you, and I wanted to ask him a little bit of La Batalla de Mixton. He told me that his grandpa had told him stories. I go, "Ooh, that's awesome!" Because obviously that's in our blood. I wanted to hear those stories that his grandpa told him. Stories that probably got passed on from his grandpa and further on.
And those stories have been in your family for hundreds of years then.
Yeah.
I mean, hang on to that oral tradition. Definitely.
I asked my dad, I go, "Oh, hell yeah." I got excited. I go, "Pops, tell me about, what did Gramps say about this battle?" I can't remember. Jesus is my light and day now.
Well, that's part of Mexican heritage.
It was a bummer,
too.
man. It was a bummer.
That's part of Mexican heritage too. You can't ignore Catholicism. I get people coming to my channel saying, that's an imported religion, Catholicism. But, I believe in Huitzilopochtli, and I believe in Quetzalcoatl, and I believe in Coatlicue. And you got to stop some of these people sometimes, and you realize that the Aztecs were colonizers. Okay, the Aztecs were interlopers.
Robert Bitto, I believe in this.
What?
That's what I believe in. The cracking open of a beer.
Well, hey, let me join you. No, so you have the Aztecs who arrived in the early 1300s, and so 200 years later, the Spanish came. And Catholicism has been there for 500 years. So, and that Catholicism pretty much wiped out the ancient Aztec beliefs. I mean, like full-blown hardcore beliefs. Little things, little traces of the old gods and belief systems have trickled down to the 21st century for sure. But anybody who believes in the pantheon of the Aztecs today, most likely, well, I'm 100% sure that they just adopted it. It wasn't passed down from them, because that religion was pretty much completely wiped out, except for elements that were taken and co-opted by the Spanish and allowed to continue through fiestas and different towns or whatever. But the irony of the thing, like I said, well, I'm not going to take sides either. The irony of the thing is that the Aztec religion had only been in Mexico for 200 years, but Catholicism has been there for 500. So, so people will look at
the syncretism.
Right.
The syncretism, because the Aztecs got a lot of their influence from the previous Olmecs that were there thousands of years before then. So,
right.
I mean, if you look at it that way, it was a lot longer than Catholicism.
Right. And so, yeah, you're right. There was a continuity there. And when the Aztecs arrived, they did what other colonizers do. When other colonizers do is they incorporate the beliefs and other things, whether it's culture, elements of culture, food, whatever, of the people who they conquer. And so that's why Aztec religion is so complex. There was an emperor called Huizot who was very powerful, named after a mythical lake monster that lived in Lake Texcoco. This lake monster that's in one of my books, the Mexican Monsters book, and I've talked about it extensively on my channel. They think it could be a gigantic water otter or some other aquatic mammal that became extinct, a megafauna from before the Ice Age or whatever. But so this Emperor Huizot, he tried to consolidate these gods and belief systems into one standardized belief system. And while he was this big conqueror and a very skilled administrator and a very savvy politician, he couldn't accomplish that because there were so many diverse views. Take, for example, to circle back, the eclipse. What was an eclipse to the Aztecs? Well, they thought that there were 3 different explanations. So which one's the right one? They couldn't narrow it down because they were incorporating beliefs of other people. The one that we see in the Codex Vaticanus, a book, an illustrated book of the Aztecs, there's a jaguar that's eating the sun. So one story is that there's a gigantic jaguar which symbolizes, darkness and stealth. This jaguar is eating the sun, and then the sun, wriggles free from the mouth of the jaguar. That's one explanation. Another explanation is that there is an underworld. There's a place where dead people go in the sky, not just below the earth, but there's an underworld that's in the sky, but we can't see it because the sun is so bright. And then in the times of eclipses, that underworld passes in front of the sun. And so we can see this underworld, and at that time, spirits can come down to earth. Now, there was a third belief in the Aztec Empire and the Aztec cosmology about eclipses. And that one was that the sun god is constantly battling evil forces in the sky. And there is a group of what we would call in modern society, I know they didn't think of them that way back then, we would call them demonic entities called the Tzitzimime, which is very similar to the name for one of the Bigfoot creatures in Mexico, the Sisimite. This is the Tzitzimime. And they were like ghoulish creatures, skeleton type creatures that were supposedly the souls of captive warriors who were sacrificed, who are battling with the sun constantly. And during an eclipse, they have an edge. They're like beating back the sun. And then during an eclipse, they can come down to earth and cause all of these problems, right? So we have this very sophisticated culture, and they have 3 explanations for an eclipse. And that comes from all of the diversity that you saw in the Aztec Empire. And, we can say that about our own civilization too. What created that tree that's outside my window here? Was it God? Was it the universe spontaneously manifesting something? Or was it Mother Nature? So we can use 3 explanations ourselves in our culture. Mother Nature created that tree. Well, who's that? What is Mother Nature? And that can Mother Nature coexist? Can somebody say Mother Nature while still believing in some Christian belief? Yeah, you hear it all the time. So that's the way that it is. A lot of people think that a lot of the beliefs and the myths and the gods are cut and dry when it comes to ancient Mexico, but there's a lot of ambiguity and a lot of crossover there. So I thought I'd add that because it was kind of looped back into our eclipse discussion.
No, I love that. Yeah, I mean, that term is often referred to as syncretism, where, the dominant religion incorporates practices from the local area, and that's been practiced in Christianity quite a bit. It didn't just happen in Mexico. How the
Right.
hell did the Nordics
Yeah.
or the Celts become Christianized? It was the same playbook if you really
Right.
think
Where'd the
about it.
Easter Bunny come from?
Yeah.
Where'd the Easter Bunny come from? You can go down that rabbit hole. Bad pun, right? But look at the Easter Bunny, and that's a perfect example of syncretism, and
Or
we
Krampus.
have that in our culture.
Krampus was a rapist guy, in German mythology, and then he becomes this holy fat guy that runs around giving gifts. But the origins of it, he wasn't. He was more like a pedophile, running around. And if people really knew of the origins of Santa Claus, they'd probably second guess about putting some jolly fat guy in their yard. Yeah, and it happens over and over and over again. And the more the the more things, at least for me, start to make sense. There's a lot of patterns you begin to see. A lot of the same stuff gets repeated. It doesn't matter where in the world. It's the same playbook over and over again. Yeah, it's that whole. I mean, and that's why I wanted to make sure we touch back on that. The whole. Catholicism has definitely dominated Mexico for the last few centuries, 100%. And we talked about the whole Virgin of Mary and the interesting things there that a lot of hardcore Catholics would probably have a hard time digesting. That it could be considered sacrilegious, but that's what it is. And the like I said, even at the very beginning, I mean, the Aztecs and the Mayans got a lot of their spiritual beliefs from the ancients before them. And so
Right.
the question is, when did those get? And if you look at Judaism, I mean, the Christian Bible, a lot of people don't want to accept this, but it's a fact that the Old Testament is the Torah. And when you go back to the origins of that, the Torah goes back to the Babylonians and the Amalekites and whatnot. I mean, it's the same thing the world over, and it doesn't matter where in the world you are. Syncretism always takes place. So when people think that they have the one true religion, that's one thing I always point to. Where did your religion or faith start with? Okay, and it got ideas from here, and it got ideas from there, and so where is the damn origins of it? And you'll never get an answer.
Do we
and
dare
the only-
ask? Do we dare ask what is truth? Right.
Yeah, exactly. And really the only answer you will ever get, because I've posed this a lot, and the answer is you need to have faith. And myself, personally speaking, I to me that's just a very simplistic answer. I need more than that, way more than that. Like Carl Sagan says, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that applies not only to faith but to things like the moon landings or any other stuff. You need extraordinary evidence. That should apply at all times, is the way I look at it. At all times. You can't just pick and choose when you're going to choose it, and then all of a sudden, oh, you know what, right there, I can't do it, I'm just going to have faith. No, I'm going to apply it on everything. Maybe I'm wrong about that.
I think faith is another caulking agent, like I said, to plug the holes. It's like saying aliens built this structure or that structure when you can't explain something. So it's a something that people use as a filler. Oh no, don't question me, it's faith. Well, Okay, if you're going to be skeptical about this thing, then you have to be skeptical about everything, I think,
You have to
including
apply
your
it
own
evenly,
religion.
or it makes you a hypocrite.
Yeah, that's what I believe, but people will argue
I
with me.
Yeah, I'm of the same mindset, and I'm saying that, I did want to touch on this. So
Uh-oh.
recently, recently I had a discussion on faith. It was a discussion. It was a real great discussion. I felt real great. It was I don't really want to call it a debate because I like the guy. We're gonna do another show later on, but he was a very devout person. I'm not, as you can hear from me. I need way more than just faith. I'm not gonna accept that. And if we apply that to everything else, but we give religion a pass, then we're being hypocrites. And fight me if you want to debate me on that. I'll gladly listen to you. Hit my DMs, message me. We'll do it again. But I felt I did extremely great in that discussion, and it was one that I wanted to have for a long time. And the reason I didn't have it for a long time was because I was scared of blowback. But then I was like, shit, I'm gonna lose a lot of people. But at the same, I had a fight against it. And I said, you know what? I need to have this discussion because I'm self-censoring. I believe in freedom of speech. And if I can't divulge how I really feel, then I'm self-censoring and I'm being a hypocrite right there. So I know I did lose some people over that. They didn't want to hear it. And I even gave the caveat, if you are very religious, you may want to place you may hit the stop button right now because I'm gonna go deep. I'm gonna go hard in the paint. That's what I did. And you, not too long ago, you had a somewhat similar experience in which you did a show of the Satanic Temple, I believe in Mexico, right? And that's how I tied it in.
Yeah, I guess it's open now. Yeah. The satanic, Mexico's first satanic temple in Catemaco. And yeah, I got a lot of blowback from that. And the
I
thing
saw your
is,
comments, man. I saw you were
Hail
getting hate.
Baphomet.
And
people were telling.
before you weren't even advocating for that. All you did was give a story of what's happening, and people got pissed. They're like, why would you do this? It's ridiculous.
And that's what I do for every single show. I never put my own opinion in these shows. I present the information, and then people ascribe things to me. Like on TikTok this morning, this one guy jumped at me because I posted an 18-second clip about the Comanche Wars with Mexico. It was chopped up, through Opus Clip. You can chop up your old shows. I'm sure, that's a hack that everybody knows now, right? So I did 2 shows on the Comanche, very popular shows, and very thoroughly researched. I spent a lot of time researching these. Each show is 15, 20 minutes. So some guy this morning was like, oh, you're clearly pro-white and anti-indigenous. And I'm like, where do you get that from? People will ascribe all these things and put all this stuff on you that, I don't know, they're dealing with things internally or something. I don't know what it is. But when I present information, but then back to what you were saying about the Catemaco Satanic Temple, people were angry at me, not necessarily because they thought that I was a Satan worshiper, which I'm clearly not. Goodness gracious. But they said to me, you shouldn't even be giving this a voice. You should not be platforming this whole thing. And I said, well, it's interesting to people, and it falls right in my niche, the magic, the mysteries, and the miracles of Mexico. It's something really obscure, but super interesting. And it has a lot to do with the supernatural and stuff. So it's right in my wheelhouse. Would I go there and light a candle in that temple? Would I join hands with the witches that are in these red leather bodysuits and stuff? Would Well, maybe I'd go and see them, but
I was
I
gonna
wouldn't
say,
be like
I don't
holding.
know, man. So some of them satanic girls in them leather pants. Come on now.
But I would, and I did put a picture of them. There's like a coven of witches that are dressed in red leather from head to toe, like bodysuits. But anyway, what I'm getting back to serious about this, but would I go there and participate in rites and rituals in that temple? No, I wouldn't. I'm not a Satanist. I'm just talking about it. And, you know, the comments were kind of funny. My favorite one was someone wrote, somebody is going to hell. Meaning, you know, me. Somebody's going to go to hell for doing this. Like, I'm just putting it out there. But putting it out there, according to some of the comments, I was risking opening up portals to hell and all these things. If you believe that way, that's fine. You can believe that if you want. I'm not going to shame you or whatever. I'd like to hear about it. You know, but if you're putting stuff on me, though, that I don't believe or think, no, that's not good. Let's not do that.
Yeah, it's kind of makes me laugh because a lot of those people that were probably vocal, when you'll probably also see them talking about free speech and how conservative Christian voices are being censored, which is true. I'm not disputing it. But then you turn around and do this, and it makes you a damn hypocrite. Because if you're going to claim free speech, that applies to everyone. Free speech doesn't include coddled speech, or it isn't just only coddled speech. It means criticism. It means speech that you don't agree with yourself. That's what free speech is. And so by saying, you know, by you doing a show, like you said, you're not saying, oh yeah, everyone go praise Satan and all this shit. You were just showing a report. And for
Yeah, I
people
was
to
presenting the
put these
material,
labels
but
on you,
even but doing that to some people said that
you're
you know, they
platforming.
assumed
You're
that I was
platforming.
promoting it and that I was
Yeah.
opening up all of the, you know, I was letting evil forces come into this dimension or whatever. You know, then what are you going to do? Stay at home and watch Netflix all day or whatever? What's a safe activity to engage in anymore? You know,
It's
but
a joke.
The temple in Mexico, the Satanic Temple, there were conservative pro free speech groups in Mexico trying to shut that place down. And the guy who built the temple, he did it the smart way. He knew that he was going to have all this opposition. So he got all the permits. And, you know, you think going and getting permits to get things built in America is tough? Try doing it in Mexico, the bureaucracy down there.
Catholic,
so he spent
Mexico.
he spent years, this guy, getting the proper permits, the zoning all lined up, all of that stuff. And the funding was all private funding. There was no government money involved. He had all of his ducks in a row, and people have tried to take him to court and do this and all that. But legally, he has every right to operate this temple there. And, you know, a lot of people who are advocating for free speech outside the realm of religion have a problem with him. And there are even government officials who have said on the record, well, yeah, you know, I advocate freedom of religion, and freedom of religion is in the Mexican Constitution. It's not a Catholic country. You can practice any religion you want there. It's in their Constitution. So these politicians are saying, well, you know what? I'm all for free speech and freedom of religion, but this can cause harm to our community and it can harm our children. So that's why I'm against it. No, I don't. I think some of the politicians are against it because it's politically popular to oppose a satanic temple. That's all, really. But legally, they have to stay out of it, really, because the guy did everything he was supposed to do, and freedom of religion is a guarantee in the Constitution. So too bad, tough luck to these people.
Yeah, it's a funny one for me. I want to read this from Gregory. He sent a couple of shekels this way on Rockfin. Wheezy, ain't the Mexica or Mexica the red-headed stepchildren of the Toltec people who adopted the pantheon of gods but worshiped the god of war? Every god of war is an asshole. The Mexica, Toltec, and a third tribe would become the Triple Alliance, aka the Aztecs. Shout out to Gregory Walker for that. What are your thoughts on that? A little comment
Well,
there.
the Aztecs were not related to the Toltecs. We don't know much about the Toltecs, but you might say, well, then how do you know they're not related to the Aztecs? Because the Aztecs migrated from outside of central Mexico. They came from the north, and they say that in their own oral history, and that's backed up by linguistic and DNA data too. So they inherited some of the belief systems from the Toltecs, because when the Toltec civilization collapsed, there was about a 100 to 200 year gap where there was a power vacuum. The Aztecs arrived in central Mexico at the right time because the Toltecs had, their civilization disappeared by the time the Aztecs were there. So the people who were there, who were the remnants of the Toltec civilization, they had some of the gods, and the belief systems that the Aztecs incorporated. So there is a legacy that way of ideas. But as far as blood goes, they're not related, by that way. But the war god, that's interesting. Yeah, they adopted Huitzilopochtli, the Aztecs. That was their, main god. And so they were a pretty ruthless empire. That's why the Spanish came with, a handful of men or whatever and conquered them, because they had, I don't know, close to 10,000 indigenous allies that said, hey, if we team up with these guys that are partly made of metal riding gigantic deer who came on big houses from across the ocean, if we partner with these guys, then we can, kick the Aztecs out of our area.
Yeah,
So,
and life will be better. And then they were wrong.
And for
about that
some
too.
people, and life will be better. For some people, for some indigenous people in Mexico, life was better under the Spanish, like the kingdom of Tlaxcala, or it was more like a republic. The political entity of Tlaxcala, and also the nobilities, the noble families of the other groups who supported the Spanish, were left intact. And, they enjoyed privileges like the Tlaxcalans, for example, the group that the kingdom or political entity that contributed the most troops to help overthrow the Aztecs. The Tlaxcalans were allowed to carry firearms. They were allowed to ride horses. They were allowed all of the nobility. They were allowed to keep their land, their slaves, their titles. The titles of Tlaxcalan nobility continued well into our modern times. And there are people who still are proud, to be descending from the ruling class. And the way they know that is because they were able to keep their privileges. And so when people have this very simplistic black and white, indigenous versus white people sort of thing, whitey bad. And I'm not saying that there's one good, bad, or bad side here, but you have to see that this whole thing is nuanced. What?
Yeah, you have to take it all in. All sides. There's good, bad, and ugly. I mean, and I try to apply that with everything. Whether it's Hitler and his book, I've done that, which may sound weird, to people, but that's one of my most downloaded episodes on Spotify. I did an objective review on Mein Kampf. I read that book twice. I gave the good, the bad, and the ugly. But if you talk about it today, everybody wants to say Hitler was even the air he breathed, the toilet he shat on, everything was evil. There was some good shit he said. He had some good ideas.
And
And
if you circle that back to the Spanish, like I said, there were some things. Life under the Aztecs was not so glorious as a lot of Mexican Americans, especially young men under 25, Chicano, Mexican Americans, people born on this side, they tend to romanticize the Azteca, the noble warrior and all of this stuff. Talk to a Totonac, talk to a Tlaxcalan, talk to an Otomi. These people were really oppressed, There was an empire next to the Aztecs, the Purépechas. They were nicer to their subjugated people. They were almost like the Romans. They would offer citizenship, what would be considered citizenship, certain privileges to a conquered or incorporated people, provided that they become more Purépecha, more Tarascan. If they decided to dress like Tarascans, speak the language, and participate more actively in society, well, then fine. You're one of us now. The Aztecs didn't have that sort of friendly incorporation. They did with some of the noble families of the peoples that they conquered, but the average people were, they had it pretty bad. Unless you were pretty far away, then, what did you care? It wasn't, you were just a farmer or something, and you paid your little tax every year and you were fine. But for a lot of people, it was a hard life. But if you lived in Tenochtitlan, imagine that, though.
Yeah,
if you lived in the capital city, if you lived in that capital city, and if you were like an artist or you were a bureaucrat or whatever, you had it better than the people living in Europe at the time. It was a magnificent capital city. So good, bad, you can talk all day about this.
Yeah, even the Spanish were mesmerized. They even said Mexico City, which was Tenochtitlan, or it was cleaner than any European city, and it was as big as any European city of the time.
They had public toilets. They had basically outhouses in this city. They had people. It's funny, if you go down to Mexico now, you could be in the poorest little town or whatever. There's always a nana who's sweeping the porch. You know what I mean by that. So in Tenochtitlan, there was that also. Everybody was sweeping and cleaning things and washing things down and everything. And we know this because the Spaniards entered the city as guests of Montezuma II, the emperor. And the Spanish were there for months before things went south. They were guests and they were observing and writing diaries and things like that. And these conquistadors, some of them traveling with Cortez, had been to not only the big cities in Spain, but they've been to Rome and Constantinople, to some of the bigger cities in the old world. And they said that nothing compared to Tenochtitlan. It was so well organized, and the marketplace in Tlatelolco, which was a really huge marketplace, was organized like crazy. It had such a degree of organization and cleanliness, it would put anything, even today, any big mercado or tianguis in Mexico, to shame for what was described by the conquistadors.
Yeah.
There was a lot of good stuff. If you lived in the capital city and you had a decent job, you were a scribe, or you were a bureaucrat or a teacher at one of the schools for the warriors, or if you had a decent position, you would be living better than 99% of the people on Earth at the time. So it wasn't all bad.
100%. And I mean, that what you just explained right now is really no different than like let's say it's society of today, where if you got money and the economy isn't affecting you, life is great.
Well,
But if
yeah,
you're
Andrew
suffering,
Tate jetting around the world, right?
yeah, if you're suffering, I mean, the similarities. This is why when because I'm not, I've studied the shit out of the Aztec Empire and the downfall. I feel, and maybe you may agree with me or disagree with me, but I feel the Aztecs made a lot of mistakes. They could have, if they would have just squashed the Spaniards upon them landing on their shore, history may well have been very different today. But they kept fucking up, for lack of a better term, over and over and over and over again. So many mistakes. Um, uh, one of the big mistakes that they did was when they offered some of the subjugated tribes under them uh, a tax deal. So instead of saying we'll forgive all your taxes if you fight against the Spanish with us, they said we'll reduce it by like 10 or 15%. That was so stupid. And it was so many mistakes of that caliber that contributed to their loss. So history very well could have been very different. Because one of the common misconceptions that a lot of people don't realize unless you go deep in here is kind of like what you stated at first, that a couple hundred of Spaniards came here and dominated an empire of over 1 million people. That's not how it happened. That's way oversimplified. The fact of the matter is they became friends with a lot of the tribes that hated Aztec rule, and that's what helped them and propelled them over, to victory. Because if they would have been just by themselves, there's no fucking chance they were gonna
No. And
conquer
when
an empire of 1 million people.
here's an interesting thing. One of the first encounters with the Aztecs that Cortez had is he went into the capital of the Totonac kingdom. And that was a very rich kingdom in the eastern part of Mexico. And the king, the royal family, they were all fat and everything. And it's funny, you see these figurines of fat people and they're happy and everything. There was lots of abundance and stuff. And Cortez and the conquistadors were in the central part of the town. They said, "What's that building over there?" And there was a building that looked very imposing and stark. And that's where the Aztec tax collectors were based out of. So it was like the IRS building of the Aztecs right in the central part of this Totonac capital. And, what did they want them there for? They didn't, they thought they had no right to be there, whatever. The Totonacs were an ally, a natural ally of the Spanish. Get rid of these people who've been, constantly terrorizing us. So it's not so cut and dry.
Yeah, and just to come back to a little bit what you said earlier, there's a lot of Chicanos that don't know the real history and they're just Chicano pride. I think part of it, to play devil's advocate, I guess, part of it comes from some of the racism that you experienced growing up. And so when people were shit talking you or your parents for speaking Spanish or whatever, you want to gravitate, you want to have pride in you, because you could either duck and be a coward and say, all right, yeah, I am a little bitch, or I'm going to be proud. Fuck that. I'm going to take this culture and embrace it without maybe even knowing much. See, I now feel, when I was younger, I totally agree with what you said. I've dug into that research. I now understand the whole conquest, and that's why I can sit here and we could talk hours about the Aztec occupation in Spain, because I've studied the shit out of it. I've gone in depth. So now I know both, the good, the bad, the ugly of the Aztec Empire, 100%. But I think when you don't know any better, I think that's part of the reason why, because of the bullshit you've gone through. Maybe you're getting looked at as different. And so you want to have a sense of pride. And that's where you find that sense of pride all these centuries later. Because if you go to Mexico, the Aztec pride isn't as strong in Mexico. It's just a Chicano thing. And when you study the history, I mean, my wife's family, she's brown as fuck. people speak to me in English and speak to her in Spanish, and she doesn't know a goddamn word in Spanish. And her family is from Colorado when Colorado was still Mexico, like OG Mexicans, and that's not something you ever get taught of. And if you ever been into that little part of Colorado, I mean, they speak Spanglish. They use Spanish words that current day Mexicans wouldn't even understand because they're words that went extinct in the Spanish language long ago. But because they were isolated, because now they were no longer quote unquote Mexicans, they had to develop their own identity.
It must be southern Colorado, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yep. Because it's the same as New Mexico. There's just a border there, but it's the same culture, the Hispanic culture there.
And there's towns there. This was 20 years ago. I mean, a long time ago, but I remember being blown away by going to one of these little small towns, and they were adobe houses with no electricity. I'm like, what the fuck? I thought I was in the USA. It looked like Mexico. and when do you find this shit? You know what I mean? When do you hear about this in schools? Or you never hear about it. You never hear about lynchings of Mexicans right after that territory became quote unquote part of the U.S. You don't hear about the lynchings. You don't hear about the prominent Mexican families that lived on this side of the border. What happened to their lands? You never get taught that. This is shit that you have to find out on your own, do your own research, because you're never gonna. And I've gone down very, very deep, but like you said as well, you can't lose sight of nuance and look at every little thing and look at, and that's what I try to do nowadays, is look at the bad, the good, the ugly continuously. And even though sometimes I'm looking at stuff and I've been conditioned to think a certain way, it hurts my brain. I don't want to accept that I could be wrong, but in the end, that it's part of trying to get to the bottom of truth. You know what I mean? When you start getting uncomfortable, you really have to check yourself. All right, am I really right holding on to this, or do I have to change my entire worldview? And that's one of the hardest things to do, especially as you get older, because as you get older, you think you are now wiser, and you are, but there could be things that you're still holding on that are complete bullshit, and you haven't even bothered to question, and you keep going along with it.
And in our line of work here, we have to have a lot of humility, because we have to admit when we're wrong or we're going down the wrong road, and then change directions. And to a lot of people, that is a difficult thing to do, but I don't think it's really that hard. Oh, okay, I was wrong. I'm sorry. It's simple. You apologize to yourself and whoever else, whatever, and admit you were wrong, and then move on. And, that's how you learn. And then build on the new stuff that you've incorporated into the knowledge base that you've acquired. So it's hard for people to give up things, but I think it's a lot easier than people think if they, went about it the right way.
Yeah, 100%. God, I've loved this. I don't know how many more minutes you got, or if you wanted to wrap this up, because I still got a few questions I want to fire at you, but I definitely want to be respectful of your time.
Well, we can do a few more questions. That's fine.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. God, this is our third conversation, everyone. So if you guys are loving this, Robert Bitto, I love this guy. We've messaged each other, privately. So I truly enjoy my man's perspective. I may not agree with every single damn thing, but that's all right. He probably doesn't agree with every damn thing I say. But the fact that we can talk about things and get our perspectives and let people listen to different takes. It's something that's lacking in today's world. I've been having a lot of guests that I don't, and it's been many guests that I don't agree with them 100%, but I want to hear their side, because I could be damn wrong. And like I just finished just saying or pontificating about. I have to check myself constantly. I want to revisit shit that I've held on as truth, and shit, maybe I'm dead wrong. And if I keep digging at it and I keep coming to the same conclusion that I held before, then well, shit, maybe what I already believed in, maybe it is correct. And so, but it's something you have to. I think life in general is a journey. Someone sent me a DM a few weeks back. They have a small podcast that they started up. They were asking me shit about how do you start a show and whatnot. And they were like, your name is What is Truth? Have you found truth? That was their question. And I go, hell no. That's a lifelong endeavor. I mean, anyone that thinks they found 100% truth is bullshitting you. It's a lifelong thing, man. And things will come in to change your perspective, new data, new information, and you have to be open to continuously evolve. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck. Maybe a vast majority of the things you believe in are truthful, but maybe one of those major things is 100% bullshit, but you haven't been able to evolve. I don't know. So with that little diatribe out of the way, I wanted to ask you, when you've covered, like I said at the very beginning, a plethora of different topics, from indigenous tribes to paranormal to UFOs, all kinds of shit. And I did ask you, what maybe your favorite genre was, and you mentioned the ancients, which I agree with. That's also my favorite. When it comes to the UFO phenomena, so recently I had the alien scientist, Jeremy Rice, super intelligent guy, an actual legitimate scientist. He can explain to you why Bob Lazar is wrong, according to him, in mathematical reasons that I have no idea what he's talking about. It's like a foreign language to me, but super intelligent guy. And I've been kind of wary. I don't know. Ever since the government started talking about aliens, I kind of, maybe aliens is all bullshit. Maybe it's all a psyop because the government is now talking about it. I don't know how you feel about it, but Jeremy, I mean, it was a great conversation. What are your thoughts on UFOs? I mean, because the UFO phenomena is a big thing. A lot of people may not be aware, but it's a big thing in Mexican culture.
Well, okay, what do I feel about it? Well, the more and more I research it, the more and more I realize there's not a whole lot of substance there. And to go back to what you were saying about the alien scientist mentioning Bob Lazar, if Bob Lazar's story was real, now for people who don't know, he supposedly worked in classified projects at Area 51 in the desert of Nevada, and he supposedly worked with alien technologies and saw saucers and hangars and had access to this special element that he took home, I guess. I don't know.
Element 115.
Right. So why is he not dead? I mean, if this is true, why didn't they off him like in 1989 or whatever? I mean, this story has been allowed to enter the mainstream for a reason. Okay. What the reason is, people will always try to corral me and say, well, smarty pants, what's the reason then? And then I say, do you think I'm in on it? How am I supposed to know? I mean, I'm not in on it, so I can't tell you the reason, and I can't read minds. So, but I think he's been allowed to talk about this stuff, and who knows? It could have been an elaborate setup just to have someone like him. There was some other young guy who worked for NASA in the Apollo program, and he is now, and I forget his name now, he now has like a fringe channel and talks about Mars a lot, and I can't remember. God, something like that. And I should know this guy's name. Hoagland. Okay. Another young guy like Lazar who happened to be involved in this top secret stuff, and they're having to do with space. I think both Hoagland and Lazar, they don't know they're being duped or being played, but I think they're part of a bigger thing that we don't know the details of to get this information out there. In the case of Hoagland, it's that the ancient civilizations of Mars, the pyramids of Mars. He supposedly had all this insider information. And with Lazar, it's the spacecrafts. And then so you have all of this existing on the fringe, but yet it's allowed to exist. These people should have been dead. They should have been suicided a long time ago if there was really anything to this. So I think this is being put out there for a reason. And, maybe Bob Lazar actually believes in the stuff that he was working on, but I think that's part of the deception. He's not in on it, but he's being used, or else he would have been dead. He would have been killed by now.
Like the Boeing whistleblower.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or any of these Clinton people, that end up he committed suicide with 3 shots
by hanging yourself with an extension cord, with 2 gunshots to the chest, and the shotgun being found 30 feet away from your body. Get the fuck out of here. And that's a fact. That's a fact. But if you tell these Clinton apologists about that, oh, you're just a conspiracy theorist. So then if you have someone, like, back to the Bob Lazar thing, if you have somebody who totally believes in what Bob Lazar is saying, they're not going to be open to thinking that, sure, Bob Lazar thinks he knows what's going on, but Bob Lazar is being tricked for a certain reason. The hardcore researcher who believes Bob Lazar won't even entertain that idea. A lot of times but it's hard to tell because the waters are so muddied and we're not in on it. So as far as what I can see about the aliens and UFO landings and everything, I've done several shows on them where I present the material, but there's really not much to these stories. And I was listening to, I don't know if you ever follow some of the Spanish language stuff on YouTube, some of the fringe stuff. Joanan Diaz Vargas, he produces a ton of content. Insolita Experiencia. And he was talking to an abductee, a woman, and he said to her something that I kind of chuckled at. He said, Grace, the reason why I know that your experiences are true and 100% correct? Because you sound like all the other abductees. So I'm like, that would be the big red flag to me that would indicate that she's just parroting what she's heard other people say. So that doesn't indicate that what she's saying is real. But that's my skepticism coming out. Yeah,
but,
100%.
Shout out to Joanan Diaz Vargas, though, because that guy is a tireless researcher.
What about Jaime Lozan?
What? I'm sorry?
Jaime Lozan.
Yeah, he's the
like
grandfather.
The Mexican UFO researcher, for those that don't know. Because most of the audience, most of the people listening to me will have zero fucking clue of these names we're throwing out. Jaime Lozan, Jamie, for non-Spanish speakers, Lozan, Lozan. He is the premier Mexican ufologist. I've seen that motherfucker since the 1990s.
Yeah, he's the abuelo. He's
the OG.
He's been actually researching UFOs since the early 70s.
God damn, yeah.
Yeah.
I believe
and he got a lot of he got a lot in the 70s, especially the late 70s. He was on Mexican television a lot. So
I
lot of
remember
people
watching him in the 90s.
a lot of people trust him. So, yeah.
But I mean, with all the stuff going on, he could be another controlled psyop puppet as well, and has been, for this whole time.
And I think he would be in the same category of what I'm theorizing Lazar and Hoagland are. I think Jaime Maussan could be, he's being played by,
shit,
people who have agendas.
Maussan, that's correct. I misspoke there. Yeah, Maussan. That Mausan is the last name. I spelled it wrong. Yeah, you're right, man. Someone in the chat said, "What if someone like Bob Lazar was MK Ultra?" And so, in his mind, he's speaking the damn truth,
Right.
and that's
Yeah.
why he comes off as being sincere, and why his story sounds believable. But if he's being MK Ultra, then his whole story is bullshit.
And there's something curious too. I've seen enough Bob Lazar interviews. I don't know how many dozen I've seen, going back to the Art Bell days of, Coast to Coast and all that stuff. But he always seems to come down with headaches and migraines and stuff during the interviews. And I'm wondering if that's
During
like
the juicy parts.
Yeah, I wonder if that's residual MK Ultra programming or something. I don't know, but
who I'm gonna try to get on the show? The guy from Fire in the Sky. We've been back and forth. That's gonna be a banger of a show if I can pull that off. Cross your fingers. I'm working on it. The fact that I'm in contact with him, that's a good start.
Yeah. Wow, I'm impressed.
That'd be a fire ass show
That's
if I
big
could get
time.
him on. Hell yeah. That'll be great, because I mean, that's a movie that many of us have watched. It's a movie that's been ingrained in us. I mean, think about that. You're working in the woods, you're a lumberjack, and then you get abducted by some aliens and get probed in the ass and all this shit, and you disappear for a week from your loved ones, and then you just show up. You don't know what the fuck happened, and it's a wild story.
Yeah.
I have questions, even though I'm trying to get a talk to him. I do have questions. Maybe he was MK Ultra. I just don't know anything anymore, man. I don't know, but I want to have these conversations. I want to keep exploring what the hell is truth, because there's a lot of bullshit going on.
Is that Travis Walton? Is that the guy's
Travis
name?
Walton. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm in talks with him, so.
And not to confuse.
I'm not saying I have him scheduled. I'm in talks with him.
Right, you're in talk. That's good.
I'm in talks with him,
really
so nothing is sure. Nothing is sure. Once I know 100% sure, then it's on Donkey Kong. But you need to join my Telegram group where I give you guys updates on upcoming guests and whatnot. But if I can nail it, man, that'd be massive.
And it's important to note there are two movies out there called Fire in the Sky, and they both take place in Arizona. The one with Travis Walton is the one that people should look up. The other one has to do with a comet that hits Phoenix. So that's called Fire in the Sky, and that predates, that's from like the late 70s. So people get confused sometimes, because I've referenced that movie before. And it's, that's about a comet that hits Phoenix. No, that's not the right Fire in the Sky. It's about the aliens. So don't waste your time watching the one about Phoenix, thinking that, the fireball in the sky is the aliens. They're coming to abduct Travis. That's not the right movie.
Now that we're talking about it, I'm gonna have to revisit that Fire in the Sky movie. I watched Goodfellas last night. God damn, that's a classic. That's a goddamn classic. You ever watch Goodfellas, Rob?
I don't think I've ever seen that movie.
Oh,
I'm familiar with it, but I haven't seen it before, I don't think. It's
with Sam Alito, or fucking Sam Alito. He's a fucking judge. Who am I talking about? Fucking hell, my brain is drunk. He It's Robert De Niro's in it for sure, and Joe Pesci, and then the
Mhm.
other guy, he died a few years ago at the age of 67. He was, remember in Hannibal Cannibal, it was like the second part to Silence of the Lambs, where the guy is eating his brain. You don't remember that?
That actor, he has an Italian last name, but he was adopted by an Italian family. He's really Scottish.
Yeah. What the hell is
I
his name?
know who you're talking about, but I don't
Yeah,
remember his name.
I don't know
I
why
don't
the
know
hell
that much about him.
Bitto.
He's I don't. Oh, geez, yeah.
It's
And he
hurting my
just
brain,
died
but
recently.
he's in good. Yeah, he didn't die too long ago, and he was only 67. But I watched that last night, and I was like, God damn, that's a great movie, man. That I don't know when that movie was made. I think late 80s, early 90s at most. And God damn, that was a piece of art. I mean, with all the shit coming out lately, I mean, I was appreciative of the art, the acting, the screenplay, the writing, um, all of it. It was a piece of art, 100%. Um, why I went on that tangent, I don't know. I think it's because I'm ready to wrap this up with my man Robert Bitto. We're gonna do another show. Every time we have these conversations, it's always fire. Where can people find you, Mr. Bitto?
Well, they can start at mexicounexplained.com, and there's no paywall there or anything. You can download every episode that I have. I had some audio quality problems with some of the files, but I've slowly fixed that issue. So you can download these files and listen to the entirety of all the shows. And you can read all the transcripts too. It's all free. So you can go there. And then if you're more visual, you can go to my YouTube channel, Mexico Unexplained. And I'm on all those social media, Instagram, TikTok. So I'm at Facebook. You can connect with me anywhere. And I love to hear from listeners and viewers. And I get a lot of really good material from people. So, and I learn a lot too. I always say, they call me the professor or whatever, but I present the material and I do a hell of a lot of research and stuff, but I have the right to learn from my audience too. And I love learning from my audience. So reach out to me, please.
Damn straight. So and I'm gonna do the same right now. Shout out to the live chat. The Beast of OC, Hemcar, the actor that we were referring to was Ray Liotta.
Right.
God damn it. And that's what's awesome. Shout out to you too for pointing that out. That's exactly who I was referring to. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. I love listening to what folks have to say, any suggestions. You learn a lot. And so to bring it back to you before we close, did you find anything about the assassin toads?
Sorry, no.
Damn it. I'm just kidding. So for those that may be in the dark, like what the hell, assassin toads, what are you talking about? Last time I had Mr. Bitto on, I told him about how my grandma used to, like, if we as youngsters in Mexico, we were harassing toads, like throwing rocks at them and shit, my grandma would get pissed. She'd be like, leave those toads alone. They're going to kill you in your dreams. They're going to suffocate you. And I thought it was all bullshit. And then my uncle was like, I talked to my uncle. Why does grandma always say toads are going to kill us in our sleep? He's like, look at how they sit and their hands are always like this, like ready to choke you out. I'm like, oh shit. That makes complete sense. And so I asked Mr. Bitto if he could do any, further research as to where that little what would you call that? Old wives' tale or anecdote? I don't know.
Came
What
up
the
with
hell.
nothing. So sorry.
Yeah. No, you're good. You're good. I mean, I haven't found anything. That's why I figured I'd throw a half court, shot or full court 3-point shot, at you with asking that.
Well, you know what? Maybe your grandma's a lot more creative than you gave her credit for, and she just made it up.
Or was. Yeah. One thing about my grandma, greatest cook ever. And I say that with my mom having passed. My mom was the second greatest cook ever. They could cook amazingly. Like my grandma was one of these, little old Mexican ladies. She was 4 foot nothing. Like I said, she was of French heritage, blonde hair, blue eyes. And he would just ask, how many people are we cooking for? 10 people, 20 people, 30 people? He didn't use no measuring cups or nothing, man. She used her tiny little fists. All right, we got 20 people, 1 fistful. We got 50 people, 2 fistfuls. Like, that was her way of cooking. And it was on the fucking money every time. She never missed. Batted 1,000 for 1,000. Incredible stats as a cook. She was an amazing person. I miss my little grandma. Tiny little thing, feisty little thing, but she would probably fuck up a lot of people, being that little ball of energy. Mr. Robert Bitto, always enjoy you. We're definitely gonna have you on again. I feel we can talk about a bunch of different subjects. This was about the solar eclipse, and we ended up going off the rails on a plethora of different areas, but I think people will enjoy it. Yeah. Any other places you may want people to find you?
No, like I said, MexicoUnexplained.com is a great starting point, and there's, links you can click on and things you can explore there on your own. So that's where I would recommend people go to first.
Awesome. Very beautiful. Thank you, Mr. Bitto. We will stay in touch. You be safe and enjoy the rest of your weekend, my man.
Thanks again for having me. It's a pleasure. I can't wait till the next time.
Absolutely. All right, y'all. That was Mr. Robert Bitto. I hope you guys enjoyed that. He is a true treat to have. I always enjoy chatting with him. Check out the links at the bottom of your description. And check out his YouTube channel. He's got many, many videos, well over 900 videos, I believe. So check him out there. And I hope you guys enjoyed that. I will be on Tom Cooper's The New Prisoners Rumble channel. So check me out there in about an hour. And we will meet you there. All right, y'all. Much love, hugs, and kisses.
And now's the time when things are shifting. There's gonna be a new world order out there.
Well, he's dead, so.
My fellow Americans, I've said on several occasions that I wouldn't comment about the recent congressional hearings on the Iran-Contra matter.